Tarrant County Master Gardener Association has partnered with the Tarrant Regional Water District to encourage water conservation. TRWD maintains 4 area lakes and pipelines needed to provide surface water to local water treatment plants so they can clean that water to meet drinking standards for our communities. They also work with many cities in Tarrant County, such as Fort Worth, Arlington, Mansfield, and many others, to provide water conservation programs to the community. Conservation is an important water supply strategy to help meet the needs of our growing population. There are currently 2.3 million people living in Tarrant County, and this is expected to double over the next 50 years. At SaveTarrantWater.com, you can sign up for free weekly watering advice custom to your location. If you're a resident of Tarrant County, you can sign up for a free sprinkler's checkup where a licensed irrigator comes to your home, provides a comprehensive evaluation of your system with recommendations to reduce water waste. There's also an event calendar where you can find information about future classes and workshops. So be sure and check out SaveTarrantWater.com to sign up for their free services.
Gardening for Birds. I'm Camille Thomason, and I've written this in the last month or 2 or 3, made changes and change it again. But Gardening for Birds is aimed at generally the Metroplex, that is the Dallas-Fort Worth area. A lot of the flowers and things I chose because they will grow well in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So if you live outside that area, keep that in mind and make the appropriate changes. This QR code will lead you to a handout. If your iPhone or computer can read this QR code, it will take you to the handout. If you can't get it that way, the address, the web address at the bottom, will also take you to the same handout. I'll give you this same link at the end of the talk so that you can get it then if you don't get it now. All right, how can you attract birds? Create a brush pile. Birds like a place to hide, to get into. The brush piles are good places for nests, they're good places for safety, and they have a lot of insects in them. So create a brush pile. That's a good start. Doesn't have to be monstrous, just in an out-of-the-way place in your yard. If you let your grass grow a little longer, birds like that. Grass that's a golf green, there are no bugs in that. But if you let it get a little bit longer, then there can be bugs and worms and reasons for the birds to land on your yard and peck around. Have a water feature. Birds like water. Remember to make the water feature not a safety hazard for your birds and your other critters. Make it shallow and give a way for the other creatures to get out. So if you get a lizard or something in there, he doesn't get trapped. Make sure there's a ramp or some kind of step to get the birds or the creatures out of your water feature. Do as much as you can to shun herbicides and pesticides. 30 years ago, I had no lizards, no frogs, and almost no birds in my yard. And then I quit using herbicides. And amazingly, now I have a lot of all 3. So do your best whenever possible to avoid herbicides and pesticides. Hang nesting houses. And what nesting houses depends on what birds you're trying to attract. Certain types of birds like certain types of houses. So if you know of a bird or 2 that are in your area, look up what type of housing you need for those birds, because what works for one does not necessarily work for another. Put up feeders, but the same advice applies to feeders. Different birds like different types of feed and different types of feeders. So do some research on the kind of birds you think you're going to get in your yard and put up the feeders that would attract those birds. And finally, try to grow native and other bird and pollinator-friendly plants. You'll collect a lot more butterflies and insects that the birds can eat if you're growing native and bird-friendly plants. If you attract the pollinators, you're going to get the birds. So work on not just birds, but also your pollinators. One of the biggest helps in creating a garden which will attract birds is the National Audubon Society resource. They have this link, audubon.org, and it's native plants. And if you go there, you get to type in your zip code, and it will tell you what plants in your area attract birds. And moreover, it'll tell you which birds. So it's really very helpful database. So make sure you take some time to go there and look up your exact zip code, and then you'll be able to see what plants are good and which birds they attract. This native plant database is also excellent. It was written specifically for the Metroplex, although they've now added other sections to it. But it gives things that are generally native plants, and they grow well and easily in our area. So it's an excellent resource to attract birds, butterflies, bees. The Texas Smartscape plant list is one aimed at water conservation. The plants on that list tend to use lower amounts of water and help improve runoff problems. Finally, the Fort Worth Audubon Society has a wonderful Fort Worth Metroplex area listing of all the birds in our area and what frequency you can see them. It does not say what plants they're good for, but at least you can know what birds are there, and then you can aim the plants in that direction. There are a few terms I'm going to use. I'll use annual. That means you have to plant it every year. I'll use reseeding annual, and those are ones that'll come back from the seed from the previous year, if you're lucky. One of my favorites of that is larkspurs and cosmos. I really love those two. Perennials are ones that come up every year from the previous year's roots. Some of them also reseed. An example of a perennial that's very common in our area is Mexican petunias. Short-lived perennials come up the next year and probably the year after that, but after 3 or 4 or 5 years, they tend to die out and you have to replant them. I think Dusty Miller kind of falls into that category. It tends to last several years, but then it dies. And wallflower is one that will last about 4 years, and then you end up having to replant it. Deciduous means it loses its leaves in the winter. It could be a tree, but it could be a plant also. First thing I want to do is show you what kind of birds you might attract in our area. So some common area birds include cardinals, and I do have a picture of a male and a female one, even though my female one is looking straight at you, so it's kind of hard to tell what she looks like. We have a lot of warblers. I happen to have a semi-basic picture of a yellow warbler and a yellow-rumped warbler. But you can get them in your yard, and they're lovely birds. And hummingbirds are wonderful. Most of the ones that we see in Fort Worth are ruby-throated. And this picture is not actually a ruby-throated one, but it looks a lot like it. The broad-tailed hummingbird and the ruby-throated hummingbird are almost identical, except when they hit the brakes, the broadtail has a much wider tail than the ruby-throat. Wrens, very common in our area. We have the northern mockingbird and the brown thrasher. They're both in the same family, and both of them mimic. We all know the mockingbird mimics, but the brown thrasher does too. Carolina chickadees and tufted titmice are both adorable birds. White-eyed vireo. We have a number of woodpeckers. Here's a selection of 4, but there are others in our area. Crows and the jays are in the corvid family, and we also sometimes have ravens, but the crows and jays are very smart and great birds. The jays, they're one of my favorites. They come around in my yard a lot. The other birds don't necessarily like them, however. Sparrows. We have a number of sparrows in our area. The Lincoln sparrow is really cute with a kind of a top knot. The house sparrow is our most common sparrow, and nearly everybody's got them at their house if they live in the area. The waxwings are beautiful birds. They come in flocks. You'll see not just one, but 50 or 100, and they'll get in your trees and decorate your yard, and they'll come down and clean off all the berries off your bushes, and then get back up in the trees and sit there a few minutes and then move on down to the next house. So they'll clean off the holly bush berries off of everybody's bushes in the whole street in an afternoon, going from house to house. But they come in big flocks and they're gorgeous. Finches, we have a number of finches. You do sometimes in Fort Worth see the goldfinch, which isn't actually a true finch. And they're not the bright colored goldfinch you'd see in the summer in, Minnesota or Wisconsin. They're paler in their winter color. Lots of normal Texas birds here. The robin, we have lots of robins. And this picture on the left, I just had to put it in here. This is a mama robin trying to feed a bat to her baby. And the poor baby has its mouth as wide as it'll go, and that bat's still way too big. I have a whole series of pictures of this robin trying to feed this bat to the baby. Eventually, she had to make the bat into smaller pieces for the baby to be able to get it down. These are other very common birds in our area. The painted bunting picture I just added just yesterday, that was taken in Benbrook, Texas, in my cousin's yard. But painted buntings are gorgeous. If you get a chance to see one of those, they're hard to photograph because they don't stay put. They move around. All right, now let's look at some perennials that will attract some of these birds we've just been looking at. I want to start with the Texas columbine. Texas columbine is lovely. They're almost all the native ones, I think, are yellow. This one on the right is in front of my big pecan tree, and the pecan tree is on the west side. So the columbine gets protected from the late afternoon west sun by the trunk of the tree, but it gets the morning sun, and it loves that. It does create new ones. It reseeds somewhat, but it's never a problem. It's not like there's hundreds of them that come up, but you get a few that come up that you can put other places in your yard or share with a friend. These are the birds that are particularly attracted to the columbine. And this list of birds and things came from that first database that I gave you in the references, the Audubon plant database. The Turk's cap, the picture at the bottom there is in the Fort Worth Perennial Garden, and they're almost in full sun and they bloom like crazy and they're beautiful, but they'll also grow in almost full shade and still bloom. They just don't bloom as much. They will do hummingbirds, butterflies, and pollinators. Purple coneflower, my mom called them pink daisies, but they're lovely. They'll grow in full sun or partial shade, and they do reseed. So you'll get new plants as well as the old ones back up. Coreopsis, when you buy those, you need to watch because you can get both annual and perennial versions of Coreopsis. So choose wisely, read the little labels and see which one you're getting, depending on what you want. It says deer resistant, but don't bet your Coreopsis on it. If the deer are hungry, they'll eat it. Gay feather is lovely. There's a huge gay feather patch down at Dinosaur State Park every I think June, July is when it blooms. And it is beautiful. And you can tell it just gets covered with butterflies. And where the butterflies are, the birds aren't far behind. There's a male monarch on the left and a gold fritillary on the far right. And you almost can see the hair streak that's kind of there on close to the fritillary. Do you know how to tell a male monarch butterfly from a female? Look at that male monarch. I don't know if I can get my arrow to point. Yeah, if you can see that arrow, look at the male monarch, and right down on it by his abdomen, but on his wings are two black dots. The males have those black dots. And in addition, the veining in the wings is thinner. On the females, that veining is thicker. We'll get to a female one in a little bit, and I'll try to remember to point it out. More butterflies on gay feather, pipevine swallowtail, a fritillary, and a buckeye. Inland sea oats is a perennial. It's a grass, and it gets lovely drapey oak heads. It reseeds readily, so be warned. Put it in a place where you can control it because it will come back up. A good place is in a shady place in your backyard. It does like shade, but in a place where you can like mow around it. So if something comes up out of where you want it, you can just mow it down. They pull up easily, but you don't want to have to pull them up all the time. So put them in a place where you can control them. Milkweed or butterfly weed. This is a beautiful plant. The butterflies love it. It has a whole list of birds and butterflies that eat from it. The additional one is the milkweed, which is an antelope horn. And this is particularly enticing to the monarch butterfly. The monarch butterflies eat these. The good news for the monarch butterfly is that it gives them a nasty taste, so the birds don't like the monarchs to eat as well as they do some other kinds of butterflies. Goldenrod, I know everybody groans when you think goldenrod about allergies, but in reality, it's a really good flower for bringing in birds and butterflies. The viceroy and Gulf fritillaries are both on these two pictures. The goldenrod has also historically been used for dyes. It makes a great yellow dye. The Texas aster, it's a beautiful fall plant. It blooms a lovely purple. They come in great masses, and you'll see the pollinators flocking around them. Lantana comes in both perennial and annual varieties. So check the label when you're buying one so you'll get the one that you're after. Usually, not always, usually the yellow ones are the annuals and the perennials are the pink and yellow kind of mixed ones. And that's a big bee fly on the bottom perennial lantana. Firewheel or Indian blankets or Geolardia are beautiful reseeding annuals, and some of them are perennials. So again, it depends on which one you get, but you can get started with seeds and then go from there. I have some that'll grow in my yard and they come up in the sidewalk. They will kind of spread themselves around, but usually you can move them successfully. Greg's Mistflower is a perennial. It's lovely. It's almost always covered with butterflies. This happens to be a queen butterfly that's on this one. The blue mistflower looks almost exactly like Greg's Mistflower. This one, I happen to have taken this picture in South Texas, close to McAllen at Rio Benson State Park. This bush had, I couldn't even count all the different kinds of butterflies that were on this mistflower bush. It is a perennial, and it was just covered with butterflies. Needless to say, the birds were all in the trees all around, waiting for a dinner of a butterfly. Spiderwort is lovely. You'll see it growing wild out on the highway, but also it does great in your yard. They do reseed and come up, but I haven't had a problem with them trying to take over. You just get a few plants. Passion flower. Mom had these growing up. They grew well. It's a vine on her cyclone fence. And again, they'd be covered with the butterflies, which would attract the birds. This happens to be a Gulf fritillary butterfly. Dill, fennel, and parsley are all host plants to the black swallowtail. And the black swallowtail butterfly is a lovely butterfly, and they'll lay their eggs on these plants, and especially the dill. They like the dill and fennel even better than the parsley, but they do the parsley too. They'll lay their eggs on there, and then these caterpillars will hatch. And here's a picture of one of the caterpillars, and they have these horns. They're not always visible. The horns kind of hide, and then when they get upset, the horns will come up and appear. And These caterpillars start out so little you don't even see them, but pretty soon you'll notice that there's some leaves missing on your dill and fennel. And then one day you'll go out there and there'll be these huge caterpillars the size of your little finger, and there won't be any leaves at all on the dill and fennel, and maybe the parsley too. But if you're lucky, the dill, fennel, and parsley will all put back out, draw in a whole bunch more of the black swallowtails, and then it'll start the cycle over again. And the picture on the left is a black swallowtail butterfly. Happens to be on some phlox, but that's what the butterfly looks like. Mexican petunia, it is a perennial. It does reseed. There's a short one that's, I don't know, 6 or 8 inches tall. It doesn't get very tall. And it's pretty well mannered. It does spread and it does reseed, but it doesn't tend to take over. There is a taller one that's about, 15 to 18 inches tall. That one will take over and in a flash. So if you get the taller one, put it someplace where you can control it. Scarlet Gilia, beautiful plant. Lots of them grow wild. They have kind of a star-shaped flower. They're really pretty. They attract a number of things, but almost always the butterflies and the mockingbirds. This is a bee balm, and it is a perennial. It does reseed. It grows pretty well. I've had good luck getting them back. And the hummingbirds especially like this one. Sages, we have dozens of sages that grow in our area. So look for one that suits your purposes. The butterfly on the one on the left is a skipper. And the fiery skipper is a fairly common skipper in our area. And this is more sages. These are some of the pinkish red colors ones. And the moth that you see is called a hummingbird moth. And I don't know if any of you guys are gardeners, but the hummingbird moth has a different identity. If you grow tomatoes and are familiar with the tomato hornworm, which is this huge green worm with a big horn on its rear end, that is the caterpillar stage of the hummingbird moth. So if you see a hummingbird moth, grab your tomatoes and run. Garden phlox, the old-fashioned garden phlox. This particular garden phlox came from my husband's mom, and I think she got it from her mom. It's been in the family for many, many years. It gets a little taller than the more domesticated phlox, like the Fanic phlox, but it's beautiful and the butterflies love it. The John Fanic phlox is also a perennial. You could buy this one at your nursery. You can't buy the old-fashioned garden phlox at the nursery. You got to get it from somebody that's got it. And that's a giant swallowtail butterfly on that. All right, now let's look at a section on annuals. There were some of the things in the last section that could be an annual depending on what variety you buy. But these things like begonias are definitely an annual. They do like some sun and they like partial shade. And again, it depends on which type of begonia that you get. This picture is from the Dallas Arboretum, but they had beautiful begonias. The hummingbirds especially like the red begonias. You can attract a lot of wonderful birds and pollinators to larkspur. It's a reseeding annual. It comes back up if you're lucky the next year. The only pictures I had were blues or it's actually kind of a purpley blue and white, but they also come in pink. They get about 2.5 to 3 feet tall, and mine just finished going to seed just in the last week or so. They were running kind of late this year. Most of the time, the seeding is done by the middle of June. The Mexican hat, you'll see it growing wild on the highway, but it's also a lovely reseeding annual and comes in several different colors. Notice there's a lot of birds that like the Mexican hat. Sunflowers, and there's a number of different kinds of sunflowers. They are reseeding annuals, and birds and butterflies love them. There's an orange sulfur butterfly almost blending in with that picture on the left. See lots of sunflowers growing wild on the highway, and that works well. It attracts more birds and butterflies. Morning Glory is a reseeding annual. It comes in pink and purple and blue. It'll grow well. I a lot of times plant it in my front flower bed, and they just grow and take over my holly bushes, which suits me fine. I like the Morning Glories. They're really pretty. A lot of the pollinators and butterflies like them, but the seed eaters like them too, because the birds that eat seeds, the Morning Glories go to seed and the birds get the seed. Golden crownbeard is another annual that reseeds easily. This is a queen butterfly on one and a brown belted bumblebee on the one beside it. These do go to seed pretty wildly, so again, put this one in a place where you can control it. Black-eyed Susan, traditional old-timey flower, but it does really well and has a large group of birds that it attracts. Cosmos. I have to laugh when I get to this one. My mom bought Cosmos seeds at Sutherland's, I think 30 years ago. Sutherland's is long gone, but the seeds aren't. We planted them that year, and she had lovely yellow, gold, and orange Cosmos. They got about 18 inches tall. Really enjoyed them. The next year they came back up, and she had some lovely ones, 18 inches tall, and a few that got about 5 feet tall, and they didn't bloom until late August. The shorter ones bloomed all summer. Now I still have the same seeds, or their grandkids, or whatever you say for that. But now when I plant them, I get a few of the short ones, and 75% of them are 5 to 10 feet tall. They just are huge, and they bloom in late summer. And they are literally covered with hummingbirds, birds, butterflies, bees. The seeds did what we call, as gardeners, bolted. They did not hold true. And the seed eaters love them and spread them, the butterflies and pollinators and finches. And this is my front yard with the bolted seeds. Notice some of them are out the top of the picture. They're so tall. But I used a rope to kind of hold them upright because they were falling over and I couldn't mow. But these are Cosmos, and most Cosmos seed, when you first buy them, are the nice normal size. I have no idea if all of them will bolt, but this group of seeds bolted, and the resulting flowers are just loved by all the wildlife. Zinnias are lovely. They're annuals, and these are female monarchs that are on this zinnia. Notice how bold the little lines are, that the veins that are inside their wings. They're much bolder lines than on those the male one that I showed you earlier. Okay, let's look at trees. 4 really great trees for pollinators, butterflies, and birds. Our pecan trees, of which we have a number of different varieties: Shumard oak, bur oak, and blackjack oak. Those are really great ones. And all of these birds that are in this list, they like these trees. The trees have things that they can sometimes eat in them. They also are wonderful for nesting and resting. So these trees are especially favorable for a lot of the birds of our area. Another favorable tree is the redbud, which comes in several different varieties of blooms. Here's a white one on the right and purple and pink on the left. And again, they're attractive to a number of different birds. Mexican plum and slope plum are both attractive to birds, butterflies, and pollinators. And again, a nice list of birds that really like these trees. The fruit on this tree is delicious for humans, but the birds just go crazy. The mockingbirds especially seem fond of the plums. They get in there and peck every one of them if they can and put them all over the sidewalk. But They're good down there, and then you'll see the butterflies and the bees on them. These three trees, you kind of have mixed feelings about: mulberry, mimosa, and hackberry. The birds love them. A lot of butterflies and hummingbirds love them, but master gardeners do not generally recommend any of these three trees. The mulberry, the birds love the berries, but they make a huge mess. And by the way, they're good for us too. I love mulberries also, but they make a big mess all over your yard. And so mulberries aren't particularly recommended. But if you have a place that's out of the way where you can plant one and it won't bother you when all the berries start falling all over, go for it. Mimosas, I love mimosa trees. I grew up with mimosa trees. When I was growing up, we had mimosas and you'd climb up in it, and the branches were so sprawled out, you could just lay down on a branch and read your library book for an hour sitting in the tree. The hummingbirds and pollinators love it when they bloom. The blooms are very attractive to those two animals, and the blooms make a big mess. They get all over your yard. The tree, because it is sprawling, the limbs are relatively weak and break off pretty easily, and it's not a long-lived tree. But I loved mimosas growing up. Hackberry, its biggest call is it is the only host plant for the hackberry emperor butterfly. So if you want to be a good neighbor to the hackberry emperor butterfly, find a place to stick a hackberry. Shrubs. Shrubs, they attract birds. The azaleas in this picture, they're in my backyard, and I have black Texas gumbo in my yard. So I have to dig out all of that dirt and put in a mixture of pine bark mulch and peat moss to make acid soil for the azaleas before they'll grow. If you plant them in black dirt, they'll be dead in several years. Once they kind of spread out of their initial pot, they will not be happy. They like acid soil and not our black dirt. Butterflies, hummingbirds, pollinators, and deer like azaleas. I'm in the city, so deer aren't an issue for me. Holly. It is an evergreen. It's lovely. It blooms, and when it blooms, it attracts the pollinators, and then it makes berries, and the cedar waxwings come, and you have a great time. Tropical hibiscus is beautiful. They're not winter hardy in our area, but they do attract hummingbirds like crazy, but also the butterflies and the other pollinators. Oh, the American beautyberry bush is really lovely. It makes big, long, drapey limbs, kind of like, a bridal wreath, if you know how they grow, kind of up and out. And the American beautyberry bush is a native. There's a whole bunch of them up at Lake Ray Roberts. It's a trail that just gets buried in American beautyberry bushes with those purple berries on them. And then there's always birds and everything else all over that trail. I love walking that trail up at that lake. Coral bean, also called cardinal flower. Some call it a shrub, others a small tree, gets this gorgeous bloom on it, which then attracts all the usual birds and pollinators. But it's lovely. If you want to see some, go up to the perennial garden in the Fort Worth Botanic Gardens. They have some there. All right, thanks to the Audubon Society, they let me use a lot of their pictures. Also used some pictures from Thayer Birding because they had given permission to the Audubon Society, which gave it to us. I also swiped pictures from my cousin Nancy Pretty and Master Gardener Ginger Basin and Khaki Cunningham, who is a master naturalist in the area. Anything in this pictures in this presentation that you saw that weren't labeled, I took them. So I labeled all the ones that were from someone other than me. And here's the link again to the handout. If you can do the QR code, there's that one. And then the web link is down below. Okay, Dick, are we ready for questions?
I think so. That was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you,
So
sir.
far, I only see one in the Q&A box. Question is, when is the best time to plant wildflower seeds?
I have not had very good luck planting them, I'll have to confess. And I've tried both spring and fall. But get the wildflower seeds and read on them what it says and try to follow the directions. Most of them say early spring, but some of them say fall. And some mixtures are aimed at different times of the year. So it depends on what mixture you get. So read carefully on the seeds that you get. And if you can, buy them from somebody not a long way away, someone close to our area where your information will more likely be accurate.
Are there any tips to companion gardening these wildflowers to help increase their resistance to pests?
I do not know them offhand. I bet there are, but sorry, that's not in my knowledge base.
Let's see. Mary Carter said she found fall to be best for wildflowers.
Okay, good.
What flower seeds are light sensitive to germinate? In other words, do they need to be very shallow, I guess, so they get some light?
Again, it'll depend on what seeds you're getting. So check the instructions on your seeds and try to follow them as closely as you can.
Question from Alex. What are some HOA friendly things I can do and still invite birds?
A lot of these plants are normal nursery plants that HOAs shouldn't have a problem with. My guess is they'd complain about the goldenrod and a thing or two like that, but go back to the more normal ones like the echinacea and some of the ones that when you go to every nursery in town, you'll see. And there's a number of the ones on the lists of annuals and perennials that you'll find at all the nurseries. And so most of the HOAs won't have a problem with any of those.
Okay. What do Carolina wrens like?
The wrens are seed eaters because they'll come to a feeder if you have a feeder, but they won't come a lot. They really like to go around and pick up insects and things off the ground. So they will eat some seeds if you have the right kind out, but they'll pick up insects off the ground, which means they'll be looking for grass that's a little longer, where things might be crawling in it that they can go down and get, and places to hide. I have some wrens nesting here, and they go down and they get in the bushes and they get insects and things out of the bushes and take them up to the babies. So I think they eat a lot of insects, but they eat a few seeds because occasionally they'll come to the feeders and they get the small seeds at the feeders. I have some millet and some other smaller things in the feeder. So when they get something from the feeder, I can't see in their mouth, but I don't see anything hanging out. So it's small. So it's got to be like the millet size stuff.
I've heard, though, that whenever they feed their babies, that they only use insects.
That's what they seem to be getting out of the bushes that they fly to when they're feeding their babies.
Caterpillars and things like that.
Yeah. I wish they'd get gnats. I have gnats.
Or mosquitoes.
Yeah, well, that'd be even better.
When is the best time of year to begin your garden?
Gee, again, it kind of depends on what you're planting, but you got to prepare the soil first. So get it all turned over and ready to go. A lot of things can be planted in spring, but then there are other things that will do better if they're planted in a cooler time, either spring or early fall. So check what you're planting. But in Texas, most of the time, spring is our primary planting time. Just get your garden ready before it's time to plant.
What is the most heat-resistant, low-maintenance flower or flowering bush?
You can hardly beat echinacea. The coneflowers are really hardy. The petunias, the Mexican petunias are really hardy. If you don't mind cosmos taking over, they do really well. So look for some of those things that you see a lot. Drive around your neighborhood, see what's growing in profusion and get some of that.
Yeah, and
Most
the
flowers, most flowers the birds like. There some they don't, but most of them, if you pick the common ones, they like them.
Yeah, and the lantana is really good.
Yes, lantana is good. I haven't had much luck with it at my house, but I have too much shade and it likes more sun than I
Yeah,
have.
it's got to have the sun.
Yeah.
Okay. Jen says she has dogs and neighborhood cats that visit her yard. What plants should she avoid? I guess thinking of terms of poisoning the animals.
Oh, well, now see, the first thing I thought of is what do the cats lay on? My cat, I can't grow any kind of cat mint or some of those things that the cats love because my cats go back there and lay on them and roll around and kill them. So I don't pay much attention. I'll have to confess. I probably should pay more attention. A number of plants are poisonous, but most animals don't go eat them. So I'm not a very good expert on that. But when you look up a plant, go look it up. You'll find information about it on the internet and some of these like databases from Texas A&M and other places, and they'll tell you if they're poisonous. My cat, I don't know, the only problem I have with him is him rolling around and killing them because he likes the smell of them like the cat mint. But anyway.
Okay. Amy wants to know, what are your favorite stores to shop at for nesting houses, feeders, and other supplies for birds?
I can't really tell you. I don't know. I've just kind of collected some over the years, and I thinking back, I'm not even sure where I got a lot of them. A number of them were gifts from people, and I have a lot of gourds that I've painted and hung up, and so I didn't get them at a store. You know, they came from craft sales and other places like that. I'd say I have more from craft sales than anywhere else. But again, if you don't know what kind of bird you're aiming for, you may not buy the right kind of nesting house or feeder. Some birds want a little perch before they go in. Other birds, that's not a good idea. Some birds, there's a certain hole size that it needs to be. Other birds, it needs to be a lot bigger or a lot smaller. It varies a lot. People who are doing the tagging of bluebirds and things, they have to have a certain hole diameter and certain requirements. So really be very specific as to what kind of bird you're thinking about and look up the nesting requirements for that bird because they're not all the same at all.
Yeah, there used to be some wild bird stores. They were called Wild Bird.
Yeah, but I think they're gone. I don't know.
I think they are too, but they were always, very good and very helpful.
Yeah, I went there, but I think I ran them out of business or something.
Okay. Let's see. Could you provide more info on creating acidic soil?
Well, to plant my azaleas in Fort Worth, I literally dig out all the black dirt and scatter it around my yard in places where I need some more dirt. And I buy pine bark mulch and peat moss and sometimes some manure or something else to mix with it. And I put it by the dozens of bags in my flower bed and stir it around and mix it up, stomp it. And then you got to water it. That peat moss does not absorb water readily. So you've got to get it good and wet or it just repels the water. So you got to soak it and put your water hose in there and take your shoes off and walk around in it, like a winery and make a big mess with it. And once you finally get it all in there and mixed up good, then plant your azaleas in it and put a little extra pine bark mulch around them when you get through to be sure you've got the roots covered well. And my azaleas, some of my azaleas I've had for 40 or 50 years. And about every 10 or 15 years, I dig them all up, dig out all the dirt that they were in and start over. Because over time, our black dirt and our alkaline soil takes over again. And so literally about every 10 or 15 years, I dig them all up, redo the process and put them back in. And they seem to like that. They seem to do better after I do that because they've gotten mad about all the alkaline that's gotten in there on them. It also helps if you'll fertilize them with appropriate azalea fertilizer, soil, and stuff to help augment the soil so it'll stay more acid. Check at your local nursery. They'll have things that say, for azaleas and to make the soil more acid. I'll have to confess, I'm not very good at doing that. I'm just kind of more the drop them in the ground, wish them luck kind of gardener. But I do dig them up and redo the dirt every 10 to 15 years.
Well, Jeffrey said his was mostly clay. Would you do anything different if it was clay?
No, I think you'll have to augment it. If your clay is acid, then you just need to mix something in it to make it fluffier, pine bark mulch or something to give it so it doesn't all clamp together. But I don't know if your clay is acidic or alkaline. So it'll depend on which one it is, what you really need to do. If it's alkaline, you're going to have to dig it out just like I do.
Okay.
By the way, you can get a soil test through the Master Gardener office. If you check with them, they can give you a location to go to get the forms.
Yep. Do oleanders attract butterflies?
Yeah, they seem to. That is one of the bushes that I know is poisonous, but that's not why I don't have one. I have a small yard and I just don't have one, or I would have one. But I have seen butterflies on them, so evidently they do attract butterflies.
What's your opinion on putting out hummingbird syrups?
I have 4 hummingbird feeders hanging out right now, so I guess I'm in favor of it.
I mean, what do you use? I think is more.
I use a mixture of 4 parts water and 1 part sugar. They used to say 3 to 1, but now they're saying use 4 to 1. And I mix it up in jars and put it in the refrigerator. And when I need to, I re-add it. I have friends who live up in Angel Fire, New Mexico, and she puts out 5-gallon buckets worth every day. She has, I think, 30 hummingbird feeders and hundreds of hummingbirds. And it's just amazing to go to her house. And she has to mix up huge amounts of sugar water daily and changes the bird feeders like more than once a day. She has to refill them. It's just amazing to go to her house. That's in Angel Fire, New Mexico, though, not Fort Worth.
And it doesn't need the red dye either, right?
Oh, no, don't put the red dye in it. That's your hummingbird feeder will attract them without it you putting any dye in the water. And just like dye might be harmful to us, it might be harmful to the birds too.
Mary Carter says that she's gone to Home Depot and has bluebird houses. She's
Cool.
She's had 4 families, come to her house and she put them out.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad they had bluebird houses. I've had a martin house and attracted martins until the house sparrows took it over and I couldn't run them out. And so I gave up on it, but I didn't have a good spot. Martin houses, they're the ones on the tall poles that look like apartment complexes. And martin houses need lots of open space. And again, my yard is really tiny and I didn't have enough open air that wasn't in the way of trees and other things. So I had to give my martin house to somebody else. But martin houses really are great. And martins love to eat butterflies and other insects. So they're fun birds to watch. And the houses are fun. But you need to have either a big lot or adjacent to places that are open. They don't fly when they're trees in the way. They're gliders. So if your house is surrounded by trees, you don't want a martin house. It won't work for you. But a bluebird house, might. They like open spaces too, but they can tolerate more trees than a martin.
How do you discourage squirrels?
Well, today I took my Vaseline and greased my pole that the feeder was hanging on. I have I call it my fishing pole hanger. I have it's in a flagpole stand hooked to the edge of the porch. And I have a copper, I think, pole in it. And I Vaseline and grease it all the way down and then have a little pulley that draws up the bird feeder on the end of it. That works real well. And it's very entertaining to watch the squirrels try to go out on it. They get about a foot down it and then they start going upside down and fighting and falling. It's fun.
Yeah, you can watch them go up and down trying to get.
Yeah, it's great entertainment. So that works well. Another thing that I've had pretty good luck with is hanging a thin, well, not really a wire, but something thin that the squirrels can't just run down from a tree limb but way far away from the tree so they can't jump to it from the tree. And I hang a lot of times those cages that you put the suet cakes in. I hang them from something like that. And it's high enough off the ground and far enough away from the tree, the squirrel can't get to it, and a thin enough rope that he can't go down it. And that works real well too.
Okay.
Oh, and they haven't had any luck getting to my feeder. It's one of those that has suction cups on it and hooks onto your window. And I have it hooked into my den window, and it's small. It's, I don't know, a foot long by maybe 5 inches all around. And it's for the smaller birds. The bigger birds can't really get in it. There's not enough room. And I hook it to my window, and the chickadees and the siskins and the titmice, all the littler birds like to go in there and eat. And the finches, a lot of finches go in there. My cat also loves it. I have one of those cat tree things on the inside of my house, and he gets on that, and he's about nose to nose with the birds on the feeder, and he just has a fit. He is so hungry for a bird, and all he can do is look at them. He can't quite get them. Drives him crazy. It's fun.
Okay. What's a good website for looking up optimal bird needs?
I don't know. You might try going to the Fort Worth Audubon Society website and see if they have anything there to direct you, or ask them that question. There's a place where you can, send questions to them. I found them very helpful, and they answered my inquiries pretty quickly. So check with them and see what they can tell you.
Here's one. Hopefully we don't have to worry about these, but do you worry about bears getting at the feeders?
I do if I'm up in Angel Fire, New Mexico visiting. The bears love the feeders up there. Last summer, bears started coming in the daytime, and we had to quit putting out feeders in the day for about a month until the bears wandered on to wherever else they go. And then we were able to put them back out. And up in Angel Fire, when we go up there, we bring the feeders in at night. They don't stay out after dark, just asking for trouble.
What's the most fragrant flower or flowering bush that attracts butterflies and birds?
The fragrant thing I can think of are lilacs that grow up in Angel Fire, and gardenias that don't do well in Fort Worth. But I had a neighbor that had one growing up, and I love those. Those are the most fragrant things I can think of. Rose bushes don't seem to attract that many birds and butterflies. I don't know. Somebody make a suggestion, because I really don't have a good suggestion.
Well, we used to be able to grow gardenias, but now since our weather's changed so much, you can't grow them here anymore.
No, my neighbor had gardenias growing up, and I love those bushes, but you don't even find them in the nurseries most of the time anymore.
Let's see. And you share the link in the chat so we can copy it. I think it is in the chat. I think. And remember, everyone's going to get a copy of this presentation. Anyone that registered, will get the whole presentation, recorded presentation. It will be sent to you as a YouTube link that you can look at all of this information. Okay. Let's see.
Dick, could you ask Chelsea if she could ask which link she is asking for? I did.
Yeah, Chelsea, which link are you talking about? You can unmute, or she'll unmute you. Can you unmute her, Nancy?
I'm searching. Who is that? Remind me who the name is.
It's Chelsea,
Chelsea.
C-H-E-L, yeah.
Let me see if I can look her up. Yeah, she should be able to unmute.
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I'm literally watering my garden with my toddler while listening to the class. But the link I meant is the one that y'all have on the screen visually, the one that's like Tarrant MG.
Oh, that's the link to the handout.
Are y'all able to put that in the chat so we can copy and paste it directly?
Yes, it is in the chat.
Oh, okay. Well, something's missing for me. When I'm in the chat, it says chat disabled, so I'm not able to see anything.
Yeah, Nancy, I
Oh.
think you have to enable it for them to see it.
Okay.
Thank
Too many
y'all so much.
Okay, too many operations. What we can do,
Good
if
Q&A.
if I can't do that, then we can, let's see, we'll print it out and we can forward that and it can be sent to the attendee.
Okay. Okay, great. Yeah, an email or something would be awesome. Thank y'all so much.
Okay.
Let's see if she can she see it now?
Can you see it now, Chelsea? Did you try
Oh,
looking
I
at that?
can. Yeah, the chat is available now, but I don't see any messages in it. So maybe now that it's enabled, if it were to be repasted, I
Okay.
should be able to see it.
It's right
Oh,
towards the,
yes.
it's about midway into the chat at 6:38.
I think that because it was disabled until now, it doesn't show me anything prior
Okay.
for me. Oh, there it is. Thank you, Nancy.
There you
I
go.
see it. Awesome. Thanks. That's what I was looking for.
Okay. And we had a person say that tuba rose is a fragrant flower. Have you heard of that one, Camille?
Heard of it, but I don't have any. I'll have to get one.
If you have any other questions you'd like to ask, you can raise your hand so that Nancy can recognize you and unmute you. If you have any questions you want to ask. Any more questions?
I think all of her links are now in the chat.
Now, Nancy's put all the links in chat for her links. So hopefully you can see them there. And like I said, you will, in a few days, you should receive a copy of the presentation so that you can watch it again or get any of the information off of those when you get it. We thank everybody for coming.
Hey, great job, Camille. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, you covered a lot. That's great.
This is going to be offered again in August. I don't remember the exact date,
Yeah,
27th.
I saw that too. Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
it's
24th of August.
24th of
24th?
August. Okay.
Yeah.
This is the 27th, isn't it? Okay. 24th of August. At the
I did
same
find-
time?
I did find another question, Camille.
Okay.
Suggestions for protecting plants from the heat.
Oh, that's a hard one.
I know.
Keep them adequately watered. Make sure that they do get enough water. Doesn't mean drown them, but make sure they get adequate water. And also make sure you have a good mulch around the roots to keep the roots cool. That will help too. A lot of plants that say full sun will actually tolerate a little bit of shade. So if you have something that blocks some of the late afternoon west sun, like my pecan tree does in the backyard, that can be helpful even to plants that basically like full sun. So keep them adequately watered, keep their roots cool with some mulch. That's about the best you can do in most cases.
Right. Let me clarify on the question about offering this webinar again. The one on August 24th is actually through North Richland Hills. So that's who they would have to go through to register. However, they will receive a copy of this presentation, and that link, it'll be uploaded to YouTube and that link will be sent to them. So to look for more webinars through TRWD, we would advise them to go through TRWD website. That makes sense.
Does.
But thank you for asking.
Good question. Okay. No more questions? Are we done, group? Nancy?
I think so. It looks like most people are starting to log off.
Yeah, it does. We had a good turnout.
We did. So thank you again, Camille, and thank you. See, now I'm having to learn all these functions from the webinar perspective as to what I thought was turned on and what wasn't turned on. So I appreciate all the questions and inquiries. All right.
Right.
Thanks again, Camille. Thank you, Dick. Thanks, Teresa and Claire. Appreciate all of y'all's support and help. So
Happy to do it.
so
It was great, Camille. Thank you.
Thank you. I
Camille.
appreciate it, guys.